Europe. For generations, the continent represented civilization as its peak. Powerful economies, open borders, stable democracies, a society many believed had mastered the balance between prosperity and peace. But today, something feels different. Across the continent, anxiety is spreading. In the streets of Paris, people protest against a system they no longer trust. In Germany, economic pressure is beginning to shake Europe's industrial engine. In Italy and across the Mediterranean, migrant boats continue arriving at Europe's borders. And in Eastern Europe, war has returned. The old order, the system that shaped modern Europe after World War II, is beginning to fracture under the weight of political division, economic uncertainty, demographic pressure, and geopolitical confrontation. And millions are now asking a question that once sounded impossible. Has Europe entered the beginning of its decline? Because beneath the beautiful architecture, beneath the luxury, diplomacy, and stability, a silent transformation is unfolding, one that could redefine the future of the Western world itself. If you enjoy high-quality geopolitical documentaries, subscribe to DeepLine Media and become part of a community exploring the stories behind global power. To understand Europe's crisis, we first need to understand Europe's rise. After the devastation of World War II, much of Europe lay in ruins. Entire cities had been destroyed, economies collapsed, millions were dead. But from the ashes emerged a new vision, a Europe built not on conquest, but cooperation. Western European nations began integrating their economies, industries, and political systems in an effort to prevent another catastrophic war. Over time, this cooperation evolved into what became the European Union, a supranational project unlike anything in the world had seen before. Borders opened, trade flourished, a common currency connected economies. And for decades, Europe experienced unprecedented stability and prosperity. The European model became admired globally: universal healthcare, social welfare systems, advanced infrastructure, high living standards. To many, Europe appeared to have discovered the formula for a modern utopia, but beneath the surface, vulnerabilities were quietly accumulating, and eventually the pressure began to rise. The illusion of permanent stability began to crack in 2008. The global financial crisis sent shockwaves through Europe's economy. Banks collapsed, debt exploded, entire countries faced economic emergencies. Nations like Greece, Spain, and Italy experienced severe unemployment, especially among young people. Trust and illusions began to erode. For many Europeans, the promises of globalization no longer felt convincing, and then came another challenge: mass migration. Beginning in the mid-2010s, Europe experienced one of the largest migration waves in modern history. Wars in the Middle East, instability in Africa, and humanitarian crisis pushed millions toward Europe's borders. The issue quickly became one of the continent's most divisive political debates. Some viewed immigration as a humanitarian responsibility, others feared cultural fragmentation, pressure on public systems, and the erosion of national identity. Political polarization intensified. Populist parties gained momentum. Public anger became increasingly visible, and then came Brexit. In 2016, the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. For the first time, a major member rejected the vision of deeper European integration. The result shocked the world, but Brexit was more than a political event. It was a warning, a signal that faith in the European project was beginning to weaken. Then came a moment that shattered Europe's sense of security: war. In 2022, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Suddenly, Europe faced a reality many believed belonged to the past. Major war on European soil. The invasion transformed the geopolitical landscape almost overnight. Energy prices surged, military spending increased, NATO expanded its presence, and Europe's dependence on Russian energy became a strategic vulnerability. For decades, European economies benefited from relatively cheap energy imports, but geopolitical confrontation changed everything. Factories slowed, inflation climbed, households struggled with rising costs, and fear of escalation spread across the continent. Meanwhile, Europe found itself trapped between multiple pressure at once: economic competition from China, strategic dependence on the United States, internal political division, and growing uncertainty about the future of global stability. For the first time in generations, many Europeans began questioning whether the era of peace and predictability was coming to an end. But perhaps Europe's deepest struggle is not economic or military, it's psychological, an identity crisis unfolding across an entire civilization. What does Europe stand for in 21st century? Globalism or nationalism, open borders or controlled migration, cultural transformation or preservation of tradition? These questions now dominate political discourse across the continent. In France, protests erupt over economic reforms and social tensions. In Germany, debates intensify around immigration, energy policy, and industrial decline. In Italy and Netherlands, nationalist parties have gained significant influence. And across social media, political tribalism continues accelerating polarization. Many Europeans feel disconnected from political elites. Others fear rising extremism, and younger generations face a future increasingly defined by uncertainty, expensive housing, economic pressure, and declining optimism. The Europe of confidence, the Europe of certainty, is beginning to feel distant. At the same time, the world itself is changing. The global balance of power is shifting eastward. China continues expanding its economic and technological influence. India is emerging as a major geopolitical force. Middle Eastern powers are transforming rapidly, and artificial intelligence is beginning to redefine economic competition itself. Europe now faces a difficult question. Can it remain a global power in a world that is becoming increasingly competitive, fragmented, and unstable? The continent still poses enormous strengths: advanced economies, scientific innovation, powerful institutions, global cultural influence. But maintaining influence in the 21st century will require adaptation, and history shows that civilizations unable to adapt often struggle to survive periods of transformation. Europe is not collapsing overnight. Its cities remain among the most advanced in the world, its institutions remain powerful, and its people continue shaping global culture, science, diplomacy, and innovation. But the old order that defined Europe for decades is undeniably changing. The era of unquestioned stability, of economic certainty, of political consensus may already be over. The future Europe now enters will likely be more volatile, more contested, and more unpredictable than the one that came before it. And perhaps the greatest question is not whether Europe will change, but what Europe will ultimately become. Because history never remains frozen, and every civilization eventually faces its defining test. Thanks for watching DeepLine Media. For more cinematic geopolitical documentaries exploring the hidden forces shaping our world, subscribe to DeepLine Media and join us on the next journey into global power, conflict, and transformation. And as always, thank you for being with us.